Let me just start off this morning by saying, I'm going to offend you today. It's just the way it is. I'm going to offend you, I'm sure. At some point, I will say something that you don't like, that you don't agree with, that makes you feel uncomfortable, I am sure. And you know what? Whether you like it or not, I'm okay with it. I'm okay with it. It's not like I got that way from the beginning. It has taken me many years of crying in my sleep. No, okay. But it's one of those things where I just want you to know that I will probably say something that makes you go, Ben, you stepped in it today. And I'm okay with that. But here's why. This morning, we're continuing on with Luke. We're getting closer and closer to the finish. We're getting closer and closer to the important parts of Jesus' death, burial, and resurrection. And as we approach that, we get to this point in chapter 22 and 23 where we see three men who are presented with a choice. And all three of them fail. All three of them fall short. This morning, we're going to take a look mainly at Peter, but we're going to take a little bit look at Pilate and Herod as well, briefly. But we're taking a look at these three men because they are given the opportunity to follow, to know, to understand, to accept Jesus. They are given the chance to stand up for Jesus. And instead of doing that, they felt scared of the crowd. They felt scared of the repercussions of making somebody upset, and they gave up. They turned their backs because they didn't want to offend somebody, because they were too afraid that if they did, it would cost them too much. What's the cost of not following the crowd? Think back for me for a minute. Some of you might have to think a few more years than the rest of us. Some of you might not be able to think back on this yet, but think back into the time that you spent in high school. That's exactly it. I hear you guys, some of you, oh. Think back to the time you were in high school. You don't necessarily have to think about the whole thing, but just that period in our lives is one that illustrates this point well, I think. Because in high school, most of us faced peer pressure. Right? We were faced with all kinds of peer pressure, and I can speak from experience. It doesn't matter if you went to a public school or a private school, if you went to a Christian school or a secular school, it was the same no matter where you went. And again, we all come from different generations and different points in our culture, and so it may not have been exactly the same for all of us, but you think back to your time in high school, and most of us can generally say that we were pressured to do things like smoke cigarettes, drink beer, drink alcohol, to sleep around, to do all kinds of things, right? There was that pressure that, hey, everybody else is doing it. If you want to be cool, you've got to do this too. If you want to hang out at the right parties, if you want to make the right friends, you have to do these things. And I am happy to say that most of you, I am going to make an assumption for you, that you didn't give in. Now, I know that there are a few of you that may have, and well, Jesus will talk with you later, but that's okay. Most people know and understand, recognize peer pressure. And the thing that gets me about it is that peer pressure won. Whether you gave into it or not, you realize that peer pressure won a long time ago. And the reason I say that is because you take a look at our culture today, and it's no longer taboo to say that kids are going to drink, smoke, sleep around, do all kinds of crazy things. It's assumed that they're doing it. Our culture has just decided, how do we do it in a safer way? Peer pressure won because it changed how culture viewed those things. This morning, we're talking about not giving into the crowd. What does it mean? What does it take to not follow peer pressure? Luke chapter 22, I'm not going to read. If you want the whole story, you've basically got to read chapter 22, verse 54, down through halfway through chapter 23. I'm not going to read the whole thing today. I'm just going to pick out a few sections here, but I want to focus on Peter first. Starting in verse 54, Luke writes, "Then, seizing him, they led him away and took him into the house of the high priest. Peter followed at a distance, and when some had kindled a fire in the middle of the courtyard and had sat down together, Peter sat down with them. A servant girl saw him seated there in the firelight. She looked closely at him and said, 'This man was with him,' meaning Jesus. But he denied it. 'Woman, I don't know him,' he said. A little later, someone else saw him and said, 'You also are one of them.' 'Man, I am not,' Peter replied. About an hour later, another asserted, 'Certainly this fellow was with him, for he is a Galilean.' Peter replied, 'Man, I don't know what you are talking about.' Just as he was speaking, the rooster crowed. The Lord turned and looked straight at Peter. Then Peter remembered the word the Lord had spoken to him. 'Before the rooster crows today, you will disown me 3 times.' And he went outside and wept bitterly." If you skip down into chapter 23 a little bit, I want to take a look at Pilate as well. Pilate was, again, the Roman proconsul, the Roman governor. He was in charge of Jerusalem. And so in the story, right, the Pharisees, the high priests, the leaders of the Jewish nation, they hold, I'm trying to remember, is it the grand jury that decides if a case is able to be tried for, like, is there enough evidence? Right? So they've done that. That's what this first meeting that Peter is at is all about. The Jewish council gets together and they're accusing Jesus and trying to bring up all these false witnesses and determine, can we really get away with charging him with something? And they eventually get Jesus. They think they've trapped him, but he's just sitting there waiting for them to get to the point. And he finally says, "Yes, I am the Son of God. You guys have already called me that." And then they freak out. See, he's blaspheming. And so, hey, we have enough to charge him. But we don't have the power to do anything about it, really. I mean, we can do certain things, but we can't punish him the way he deserves, according to the law. Blasphemers have to die. And at this point, Rome controls that. So they pack up Jesus and they trot him off to where Pilate resides. Pilate, starting in verse 13 of chapter 23. Let me see here. Pilate called together the chief priests, the rulers, and the people and said to them, "You brought me this man as one who was inciting the people to rebellion. I have examined in your presence and have found no basis for your charges against him. Neither has Herod, for he sent him back to us. As you can see, he has done nothing to deserve death. Therefore, I will punish him and then release him." But the whole crowd shouted, "Away with this man! Release Barabbas to us!" Barabbas had been thrown into prison for an insurrection in the city and for murder. Wanting to release Jesus, Pilate appealed to them again, but they kept shouting, "Crucify him! Crucify him." For the third time, he spoke to them. "Why? What crime has this man committed? I have found in him no grounds for the death penalty. Therefore, I will have him punished and then release him." But with loud shouts, they insistently demanded that he be crucified, and their shouts prevailed. So Pilate decided to grant their demand. So again, Judas has betrayed Jesus, turned him in. The Jewish court has badgered Jesus enough that they think they have a confession of heresy, and so they are going to take and have Jesus killed by the Romans because they can't do it. Pilate hears what they have to say, and wanting to get out of it, he hears that Jesus is a Galilean. He's from the area of Galilee, and he goes, "Ha! I can get out of this. Not my problem." And so he sends him off to Herod because, hey, if he's from Galilee, that's Herod's problem. He'll take care of it. Herod had been wanting to see Jesus, had been wanting to hear from Jesus because he had heard about the miracles and all the wonderful magic tricks that Jesus had done, essentially is what Herod is thinking. And he wants Jesus to perform to him. So he happily brings Jesus in. And then when Jesus just stands there and doesn't do any crazy things, he doesn't say any outlandish stuff, Herod gets tired of Jesus because he doesn't get out of him what he wants, and he goes along with the crowd as well. He begins to dress Jesus as a pretend king. They mock Jesus, and then they send him back to Herod. And that's when we get to this part where Herod says, look, there is no reason for you guys to do this to Jesus. There is absolutely no reason that I should have him killed. You guys say that he's inciting insurrection, that he's causing all kinds of problems, but you know what? I'm the Roman guy in charge here, and I have seen nothing. He's not bothering me, so why do you think I should have him killed? But because the crowd was insistent, because the crowd continued to fight and to shout and to push against Pilate, Pilate gave in. These three guys, each having an opportunity to make a stand, to do something to honor Jesus. I mean, Pilate doesn't even have to believe in Jesus being who he is. He could have just done the right thing, knowing that this was not a bad guy. He had never broken a law. He could have just done what was right. But instead, he gets bullied around by the crowd. Now, I told you I'd probably say some things that will offend you. Let me start with this one. Some of you might know, some of you might not know, that we are constantly lied to. Oh, you mean what particular lie? Okay, well, again, probably going to offend. You realize we don't live in a democracy? Not just a republic, my friend. We are a constitutional republic. You know, the constitutional republic, I hear people every time an election comes around, and again, I know I'm offending people because I'm talking about politics, but every time an election comes around, I hear people talk about how we need to get rid of the Electoral College because it should just be the popular vote because we're a democracy. We're not. And there's a very good reason for that. You know what is a democracy? A lynch mob. A lynch mob is a democracy because the majority have voted that the minority deserves to die. And therefore, they have the right to do it. Let me give you an example of this. Let me give you you might know this, I think I might have told you this before, but do you know where Columbus Day comes from? Do you know why we celebrate Columbus Day, or used to, and now it's become Indigenous Peoples Day, which is kind of funny when you know the history of it. I want to get this name right, so I wrote it down over here. Okay, so the reason that we celebrate Columbus Day is because in the 1880s, there was an influx of migrants into the United States. But these migrants were of a particular descent, Italian. And the rest of the country took offense to all these Italian people coming into the United States. And took so much offense that papers like the New York Times and others were writing degrading articles about Italian people. And for a couple of years, it became worse and worse and worse about the treatment of this group of Italian migrants. And there was a large population of them in the city of New Orleans, which kind of seems weird because it's kind of, French, Spanish, not Italian? I don't know. But for some reason, there was a large number of Italian people, Italian migrants in the city of New Orleans. And in 1890, the police chief of New Orleans, David Hennessy, was shot and killed in the streets. Now, a passerby claimed to be a witness and said that as he was dying, the police chief had said that he had used a racial slur for Italians and said that it was is it Dangos? Something like that? Had done it. Now, we don't know if this is true. We don't know if this is false. There was supposedly a witness that blamed Italian people for doing it. So, the police went through the city, rounded up hundreds of Italian people, and weeded through them and finally got down to about 9 Italian men that they accused of the crime. They put them on trial. 6 of them were found innocent. 3 of them were let off because of a mistrial. But as they were still being held in jail before they could be released, a mob stormed into the police station and shot and killed not just those 9 men, but 2 other Italian men that they had dragged in with them. And when they were dead, they took them out and hung them up in a tree outside of the police station. Despite the attitude in that town, the rest of the country was, flabbergasted that this could happen. And so the current president, Harrison, made a decree trying to find a way to assuage the anger towards the Italian people. And so he set out and said that they were going to celebrate a day that would help people understand the importance of the Italian immigrants. And he established what would later become Columbus Day, not because they were celebrating Columbus himself, but because they were trying to celebrate someone that the entire people of the United States would know and understand as an important person. And because he was Italian, he was hoping that would help make people change their attitudes. And it would later become established as a real holiday by FDR. But that's why we established a day called Columbus Day, is because the United States had a problem with people who didn't like Italian immigrants, and they took justice into their own hands and decided that they could sway. Even when courts had saved them, even when courts had said they were not guilty, the democratic process in New Orleans decided otherwise. When we are left to our own devices, when we are left to make our own choices, we have a tendency to be swayed by the crowd. And the reason that we are not a democracy as a country is because the constitutional republic says that the majority can say without hurting the minority. The minority should have safety, protection. Now, I'm not saying that we follow that system well or perfectly, but I'm just trying to point out that we are living in a culture that is run, ruled, dictated by feelings today. Our feelings are the things that we listen to. And when we listen to our feelings, this is where crowds, where mobs become dangerous, where they become a problem and begin to threaten people, is that they are ruled by feelings. They are ruled not by thinking through, not by looking to future consequences, but they are focused on how I feel now and what should I do about that. And this is not... I know I'm offending people, but I want you to realize I'm not trying to just say one political party or the other. I'm not even just talking about politics. I'm just talking about the world in general. When you look at how we operate as human beings, we have thrown out truth. We have thrown out reason. We have decided that whatever I feel should be the truth. Whatever I feel should be what's right. And so if you don't like it, well, you better watch out for the mob. Feelings are not bad. Here's another thing where I can step on toes. Feelings are important, but it's also one of those things that causes division between men and women. Women, don't hurt me. I don't mean this in a bad way. See, Women and men think very, very differently. Because men think logically, and I'm not saying that women can't think logically. I'm just saying that in a particular situation, men are, you know this to be true when like your wife or your girlfriend or somebody comes to you and wants to complain about a problem like at work, and a guy offers up a solution, and the girl says, I just want you to be angry with me. Not at me, but with me at this other person. I just want you to experience the feelings with me because I want somebody who will be a part of this with me. Guys see a situation and go, all right, here are the things that need to be done. They need to be done in this order, and they need to be done on this timeline. Here's where it breaks down, though. See, I'm going to get the guys for you, girls. It's okay. Feelings are important, and we shouldn't neglect them because they alert us to a situation. God gave us feelings. We need them. They are for a purpose. That's where we, as guys, go wrong. Because we're thinking about logically and solutions, we fail to miss a lot of situations that our wives, girlfriends, sisters, daughters want us to pay attention to. We miss things because we have stopped using our emotions and are unaware to situations. But that's the thing. There should be a process there. There should be a thing that we go through where our emotions let us know of the situation. They help us to be aware of what's going on, but then we also need to take that step and go, how do we think this through as well? Our emotions let us know, I'm angry, I'm afraid, I am feeling these things, but that means there is a situation that needs to be taken care of. And that's why we need each other. Because when I am not feeling those things, Laura helps me feel them, and when she doesn't want to actually find solutions, I have to find those. We go together. We help each other out. The things I'm failing at, she helps me out with. The things that I will never say my wife is failing at anything. When she needs some help and assistance, I try to be there for her. Okay, I know I'm straying, but there really is a purpose and a point to this. We look at our world, and they have said, stop looking at reason, stop looking at logic, stop looking at truth, stop trying to think your way through a situation. All you need to do is feel. All you need to do is be angry most of the time today. All you need to do is feel outraged. And then whatever comes to you in that outrage is the correct solution. Again, stepping on toes and not trying to take a particular side in anything. I'm just saying when you start to destroy property of people you don't agree with, you've probably gone too far. You've probably gone too far. In this situation, getting back to Peter here for a minute. I know I've gone a long way off. I'm bringing it back, I promise. The crowd, the mob, because they don't want us to think about truth, they don't want us to think about reason, they don't want us to think about long-term consequences, because the mob wants to peer pressure you into doing what is good for the mob at the moment. They can persuade us to stop seeing what we know to be true. They can make us feel afraid to stand up for what we know is right. Peter, this guy who has been with Jesus for 3 years, who has seen miraculous things, this Peter who has seen Jesus raise the dead, who has heard words of truth. He's the one that said to Jesus, where else can we go because only you have the words of life. Peter, the guy who stepped out of the boat and walked towards Jesus on the water, is the same guy who at this moment is so afraid of what other people will think and do that he backs down. Now, I know that is, we give Peter a hard time about that, right? All he had to do was just say, yeah, he followed Jesus. But I want you to understand how important this is, how the example that Peter is setting for us, okay? Going back to that whole stepping out of the boat thing. Remember, Peter is the only one of the 12 who had the courage, I'll use that word, to actually say, Jesus, can I come out to you on the water? Peter is the only one who didn't just asked Jesus, but got his feet wet on the water and walked to Jesus. And Peter is the one who should have remembered that when he took his eyes off of Jesus, that's when trouble happened. As soon as he took his eyes off of Jesus, that's when he began to sink. It wasn't when he was walking to his Savior, to his Master, to his Lord. It was when he forgot to focus on him that the waves started to knock him into the water. Peter is the only one, or one of maybe two that followed Jesus to his trial. Peter is the only one who has the courage to not run away when Jesus is arrested. When Jesus told him this was going to happen just a little bit ago, Jesus said, "You're going to deny me." And Peter said, "No, Lord, I want to follow you wherever you lead me." And he even says, "I will follow you to death. I want to follow you so closely that if you die, I do too." And I'm going to be honest, Peter is way above my pay grade because he actually tried to follow through with it. Peter, when Jesus was arrested, followed Jesus all the way to the high priest's house and was in a courtyard of the high priest's house. Now, you got to remember that you're thinking maybe, hey, Jesus, why didn't you go, or hey, Peter, why didn't you actually go with Jesus into the trial and stand up for him? Well, technically, he actually went as far as he could go. Not being a part of the Sanhedrin, not being a part of any of the ruling council, Pharisees, Sadducees, elders, any of that, he actually was forbidden to go into the house. He probably was kind of questionable just being in the courtyard. So the fact that Peter went all the way with these men, with Jesus, and made it into the courtyard of the high priest, the guy has got way more courage than I do. He had stepped out of the boat. I have to imagine he's thinking back to that situation going, I will follow Jesus this time. I will do it. I'm going to make it as far as I can. But this speaks to the power of the crowd, the power of the mob. Peter had gone as far as he possibly thought he could go and wanted to follow Jesus, but eventually the pressure got to him. Eventually, he got scared. He wanted to follow Jesus. He wanted to be brave enough to die for Jesus. But unfortunately, all of us seem to have that moment where we look around at the crowd and we go, I think I'm in over my head. I don't know if I can really do this. I don't know if I made it. You see, Pilate got into the same situation. He may not have wanted to follow Jesus. He may not have had the same reasoning or purpose in trying to help Jesus, but Pilate, trying to be the Roman ruler that he wanted to be, trying to be the good governor that he should be, he tried time and time again. Guys, this is not the right choice. Guys, this is an idiot. There's no reason for this. I understand what you're doing. You're just trying to get rid of your political enemy or your religious enemy, whatever it is. I see that you're just trying to get rid of somebody you don't like. And he gives them an option. He says, I'm just going to punish him for the little bit of problem that I see here, and that should be enough. No, that's not good enough. Well, how about this? I usually release somebody to you. Here's a guy who is obviously an insurrectionist. That one I can prove. He's actually a murderer. That one I can prove. How about instead of giving that guy up, I'll give you the option. Here's the real deal, and here's Jesus. Here's the real insurrectionist, and here's Jesus. How about I give one of them back to you? And he's thinking, yeah, a mob's going to make a right choice. No. Pilate gives them three options or three chances to try and make a good choice, to get himself out of the situation, to try to do the right thing. But again, not because he was afraid that the crowd was going to hurt him or that anything that the crowd can do was really going to affect him physically. Pilate was more worried about the fact that if Rome got wind of this, he was going to be in trouble. And that scared him. He got to the point where the guys above him might hear about it, and then he would lose everything. There comes a point when all of us look around and say, I don't know if I can do it. So here's the point. Here's the thing that I want you to get. Yes, Peter failed. Pilate failed. Herod failed. And it comes down to this. Have you counted the cost? Peter thought he had counted the cost, thought that he knew what it would mean to follow Jesus, and had taken steps to do the best that he could. And eventually he got to a point where that cost became real. That cost became an imminent future. And he suddenly realized the cost is too much. Now, my purpose, my point, these guys, yeah, they failed. And we'll get to some redeeming things hopefully in a second here, but we as followers of Jesus in our world today, sometimes I think that we really haven't actually thought about the cost. I don't know if we've really thought about what it will mean to be a follower of Jesus when the crowd comes around. What does it mean for the church to actually be followers of Jesus in a world that is a crazy mob? It's going to take some things, some practical things, like being able to stop and think through the situation, being able to not just give in to the emotional part of what the world is yelling and screaming and chanting. It's going to mean that instead of just giving in and saying, hey, this is fun, let's go along with it, we actually have to stop and understand what both sides, all sides are saying, and we have to understand, think through, reason through. Remember what we were talking about how sometimes we're logical, sometimes we're emotional. We need to combine those things, right? When our emotions are triggered by the mob, we need to stop and be able to say, okay, I am feeling this. Why is that? Is it because I'm afraid of what the mob will do? Is it because I agree with what they're saying? Is it what do I need to think through and understand about this situation? And be able to understand not just the short-term things, the short-term consequences, what I get out of this. Like Herod wanted to get something out of it, but instead of thinking about what this would mean long-term, he just said, well, since Jesus won't perform for me, I'll just do what the crowd does. We have to be able to see long-term consequences, think through these things. Jesus told his disciples when he was sending them out, he said, I want you to be, in Matthew 10:16, he says, I want you to be as shrewd as serpents, but as gentle as doves. Meaning, I want you guys to be able to see through these situations. I want you to think through this and understand what people really want, what they're really going for. I want you to be able to understand the point or the purpose behind all of these mobs. But I also want you to have a proper response to them. That's what Jesus called us to do, to be able to think and to reason. That's why Proverbs spends so much time on understanding wisdom, to know God, to follow him, to seek him, because he's the only one that won't deceive us. He's the only one that won't lead us astray. When the world is shouting and screaming and chanting and carrying their signs or whatever it is, Jesus is the only one in this whole situation that instead of yelling back, instead of arguing, instead of defending himself the way we would expect, Jesus before the Sanhedrin, Jesus before Pilate and before Herod, just stood there calmly, coolly, collected. And when they were done yelling and screaming, he just told them the truth. I am the Son of God. I am the Messiah. You see, that's what I want you to get out of this. That's what I want you to hear and understand. We give in to following the crowd. These guys fail. We will probably fail. But the person, the one who we can count on, the one man, Jesus, the God in flesh, he counted the cost of what it would take to save you and me. And he said, that's a price I'm willing to pay. He counted the cost, looked at a world that was outraged, that he had created, that he had given everything to, that he had been the creator of. He looked at this thing that he loved and had made, and when it raged against him, he counted the cost, stood up, and spoke the truth. You're wrong, he told the world, but I love you, and I will find a way out of this for you. I will provide you what you need. You might not like it. It might offend you. It might make you upset and make you feel uncomfortable, but I will tell you the thing that you need to know. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me. Let's pray.